Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Meng Yi and I am a Chinese teacher. I teach Chinese as a second language to primary, secondary and adult students. Today I want to share with you some tips that I used to structure my inquiry-based unit in my Mandarin class. When I started teaching, I heard a lot of people talking about inquiry-based unit. So I looked into some resources and then I realized a lot of researches or a lot of practice about inquiry-based unit are actually conducted in a science or a math classroom. So I wondered, is it possible or is it realistic to implement the inquiry-based learning in our language classroom? Now, before I go ahead and share with you how I did it, I want to first unpack the concept of inquiry-based learning with you. And let's see how it looks like in a classroom. So I found this statement from Department of Education saying that inquiry-based learning is an education approach that focuses on investigation and problem solving. Inquiry-based learning is different from traditional approaches because it reverses the order of learning. Instead of presenting information or the answer up front, teachers start with a range of scenarios, questions, and problems for students to navigate. So what I take from this statement is that inquiry-based learning is highly learner-centered. It starts from students asking questions about the topic. Theoretically, it can be any questions that they are interested in finding out. But in reality, it usually guided by teachers. So teacher-guided questions. And then students will go ahead to use any resources they can use to try to find answers to those questions, and then they will present their product to the class. Well, that sounds like a fantastic concept to engage all learners, but to be honest, as a language teacher, I found it really difficult to achieve. If you're a language teacher like me, you probably know what I'm talking about. Here in Australia, as a subject specialist teacher, we only have a really short amount of time with one group of students each week. Let's take the primary schools that I am currently working in as an example. I have about 45 minutes per week with one group of students. Each week, that's it. So the limited amount of time really make it difficult for me to implement such a big inquiry unit. And secondly, I think the nature of the language learning requires us as a teacher to explicitly teach those language elements, such as grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure. I know it's tedious, it's boring, but we have to teach it to help our students to confidently use the language. There are three key factors I think are really important for us as a teacher to consider when plan our inquiry-based unit, and I will unfold those key factors while sharing with you a unit of work that I designed for my Year 5 and 6 students. Tip number 1. Real-world scenario. It's a complicated world and it's very important for our students to realize that. So when designing an inquiry-based unit, we're thinking about what skills our students will need in real life and have our students to develop those skills in a scenario that is as authentic as possible. So in this project-based inquiry unit, planning my first trip to China, I asked my students to plan a travel to China, to a city in China, and we brainstormed the questions or problems that we need to solve before we hit the road. So we got the following questions. When will I go? Where do I go to? What will I need? What's my budget? They'll need to say the questions in Chinese, of course. And then throughout the unit, students are guided to research for those questions, and as a product of this unit, they'll present their travel plan to the class. Tip number 2, the sequence of learning. When we design an inquiry-based unit, we need to bear in mind that we're still teaching a language. So it's important for us to incorporate the language or linguistic elements into the inquiry process in a logical sequence. So we need to think about what key vocabularies or sentence structures they will need to do the research or draft a plan. If you're like me, having a really short amount of time with a group of students each week, then we may need to explicitly teach some key vocabularies or sentence structures. Well, for high-level students, maybe we'll do some revisions about the keywords. For example, in this unit, planning my first trip to China, I unpacked the language content that our students will need. They need words or sentence about date and time, food, cities, transportations, number and currency, and some key structures. I won't list them all. If your students have already know those words, you may then build up on their prior knowledge to extend the text, to extend the sentence. Well, that really depends on the proficiency level of your students, but you get the idea. This is when you really bring this big topic, big concept down to the ground to consider what language they will need and to scaffold them to explore the inquiry. Tip number 3 is to plan the time for assessment. When we're talking about assessment, we're talking about both formative and summative assessment. One of the biggest advantages of inquiry-based unit is that it allows a lot of opportunities for formative assessment. But in reality, I realized that sometimes, well, actually most of times, I focused too much on guiding the learning process, but I didn't plan time for collecting or keeping a running record of the formative assessment data. So when I look back, when I need the data, I have to go through all the students' work again for those formative assessment data, and that is time consuming. So when I plan for this project, for this unit of work, I used this KWL chart for my students to write down what I know, what I wondered, and what I learned each time when I work on the project. And they have to write down the dates as well. This is for making the thinking or inquiry process visible, and this was so much easier for me to access the formative data when I need. Alright, that's how I designed my inquiry-based unit. Comment down below and let me know how you did it. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!